What if the cost of pure perfection was utter death? I'm Dre, and this is The Midnight Hour. Tonight we're going to be looking at another 19th century Gothic writer, and that is Nathaniel Hawthorne. Specifically, his short story, The Birthmark. And The Birthmark is about this married couple named Aylmer and Georgiana. And Georgiana is an incredibly beautiful woman, and Aylmer knows it, and everybody knows it. All of her past lovers have known it, and everybody that sees her on the street knows it. However, on one of her cheeks, and I believe it's her left cheek, she has this small birthmark that almost looks like a very tiny handprint. And it's so adorable that her past lovers almost compared it to a little fairy placing its palm on her cheek at her birth hour, almost blessing her with the perfection she exudes. Now, because Aylmer is a man of science, he is obsessed with perfection. And Georgiana represents such near perfection for him that this little tiny birthmark becomes this point of obsession and disappointment in him. So he proposes an experiment. Georgiana loves him so much that she agrees to go along with it. So they travel to his laboratory, which he has outfitted with beautiful curtains and with just beautiful furniture so that Georgiana and he can stay there while they perform this experiment on her. This is where Georgiana realizes Aylmer's obsessions, because she begins to read the books that he reads and begins to learn about his past experiments, and she almost respects him even more at this point. She falls even deeper in love with him because she realizes he is so incredibly gifted with this scientific mind. So to prove himself to her, and probably to himself as well, he creates this concoction that he then introduces into the soil of this plant, just to prove to Georgiana the possibility that this experiment will go through successfully. Now, this plant is near dying, it's withering, it's got yellow spots all over its leaves, and once Aylmer introduces this liquid into its soil, after a few moments, the leaves begin turning green. All of the yellowed spots begin to disappear. And that's really the hopes of Georgiana's situation, that the birthmark will disappear. At last, Aylmer walks up to Georgiana with this goblet and tells her, this is it, this is the moment of truth. Drink this concoction and that birthmark will forever disappear off your cheek. You will represent perfection itself. Of course, Georgiana takes it, drinks it, and immediately starts to feel very weak. Her eyes begin to close. She can barely speak, so she falls into this deep sleep. That's where Aylmer sits next to her, and he watches her, studies her movements, writes in his journal. And this is the moment that Aylmer actually bends down and lets himself press his lips against Georgiana's birthmark and kisses her. He immediately shudders as a result of that, so he continues to watch Georgiana. The birthmark begins fading slowly but surely, and when it's almost nearly impossible to make out, Georgiana opens her eyes and she tells Aylmer, basically, you have forsaken that which is almost perfect, and now the result of that is I am dying. Aylmer basically traded in long-term near perfection for this incredibly short-term idea of what he wanted his wife to be. And as a result, she passes away. That's how the story ends. And so I have highlighted 3 sections that I really think sum up this story pretty perfectly. And we're going to go right into them. The first of which is Aylmer proposing to do an experiment on Georgiana right at the beginning. And it says, "Georgiana," said he, "has it ever occurred to you that the mark upon your cheek might be removed?" "No, indeed," said she, smiling, but perceiving the seriousness of his manner, she blushed deeply. "To tell you the truth, it has been so often called a charm that I was simple enough to imagine it might be so." "Ah, upon another face perhaps it might," replied her husband, "but never on yours. No, dearest Georgiana, you came so nearly perfect from the hand of nature that this slightest possible defect, which we hesitate whether to term a defect or a beauty, shocks me, as being the visible mark of earthly imperfection." So there you go. That basically shows you right there Aylmer's thought process on it. He is so obsessed with the idea that Georgiana represents this spiritual idea of perfection that even this slightest mark on her cheek ruffles his feathers. He can't take it, he can't get past it, and he proposes to experiment on his very wife to remove it. After Georgiana agrees to the experiment, she asks Aylmer if he's ever dreamt of the birthmark and what it represents to him. And that's what this second quote really goes over. It says, "Aylmer now remembered his dream. He had fancied himself with his servant Aminadab, attempting an operation for the removal of the birthmark. But the deeper went the knife, the deeper sank the hand, until at length its tiny grasp appeared to have caught hold of Georgiana's heart, whence, however, her husband was inexorably resolved to cut or wrench it away." So even when that birthmark becomes one with Georgiana's heart, with her being, with her core, not even then does Aylmer hesitate to cut it away. And that's telling right there, because he is already prepared to sacrifice all of Georgiana's soul and heart, really. Now, this third quote that we're going to read really encapsulates everything that we've spoken about so far. And it comes at the very end of the story, and it says, "She slowly unclosed her eyes and gazed into the mirror which her husband had arranged for that purpose. A faint smile flitted over her lips when she recognized how barely perceptible was now that crimson hand which had once blazed forth with such disastrous brilliancy as to scare away all their happiness. But then her eyes sought Aylmer's face with a trouble and anxiety that he could by no means account for. "My poor Aylmer," murmured she. "Poor? Nay, richest, happiest, most favored," exclaimed he. "My peerless bride, it is successful. You are perfect." "My poor Aylmer," she repeated, with a more than human tenderness. "You have aimed loftily. You have done nobly. Do not repent that with so high and pure a feeling you have rejected the best earth could offer. Aylmer, dearest Aylmer, I am dying." Alas, it was too true. The fatal hand had grappled with the mystery of life, and was the bond by which an angelic spirit kept itself in union with a mortal frame. As the last crimson tint of the birthmark, that sole token of human imperfection, faded from her cheek, the parting breath of the now perfect woman passed into the atmosphere, and her soul, lingering a moment near her husband, took its heavenward flight. Beautiful writing, horribly tragic ending. And I think that the summation of this story really shows you the obsession people will go to when their thoughts on the idea of perfection become stained and threatened with earthly imperfections. But as Georgiana tells Aylmer towards the end of the story, you have rejected the best that Earth could offer. Earth isn't gonna offer something perfect. Aylmer wants something heavenly in this realm, but that is not of this realm. So this story really speaks to how obsession will lead someone into the depths of just doing unspeakable things, even to their most loved people in their lives. So to answer our question of the night, what if the pursuit of perfection led to utter death? Then I'm taking the imperfection that Earth has to offer. And in this case, it was the best that Earth had to offer. And that still wasn't enough for Aylmer. So what does that tell you about his thought processes? Remember, he's a scientific person. He's got a scientific mind. He's either 0 or 1. He's very this or that. Either you're perfect or you're imperfect. And if you're imperfect, we're going to make you perfect no matter what, even at the cost of your own life. So next week, we're going to be looking at a heart-wrenching story of when one person's illness affects those closest to them. Like if you felt something, comment if you wrote something, and I will see you next Sunday at the midnight hour.